So one is like Agile overview, and another is like for the BA people who writes the user stories, and third for the top management, how is it different from a typical project management which happens in waterfall, spiral model, or V model. So basically, this is the agenda. So how history of Agile, how is it different from the traditional? Uh, we have basically will be touching a few things about waterfall or not spiral and V model in depth and comparison of with Agile. So next it will also talk about overview of Scrum. So various roles that we have in Scrum and how we basically overview of a typical Agile project, various ceremonies in Agile, and I'll also take the questions. Hope it helps. Does it align to the what was the expectation?
Yes, it does. Um, so, Kaushik, do you have any, like, of course, you've taught people who've taken certifications. Do you have any idea of what kind of exams they usually get? I mean, what
So
kind
I
of
am
questions
also,
they get in the
yeah,
exams?
yeah. So though I'm not a SPC, so basically in CGI, I'm taking care of Safe Agilist, SSM, that is the next level of CSM, that is Safe Certified Scrum Master, and
Okay.
POPM, that is the Product Owner and Product Management. That's all I'm taking care of in CGI as of now.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the CSM questions would be very, I'll say, maybe it's very easy for me because I have 6+ of years of experience. I'll definitely share across some links where you can use some practice or mock tests. But once you register for that, they'll also give you the same your login. So before you write your final certification, you will have an sufficient amount of preparation also to be done.
Okay. All right. So, do you know if this is whatever you're showing me, the that is pretty much what comes in the exam as well, right?
No, no, Farhana, because I was not aware that this what my presentation is going to cover about is a Scrum and overview in Agile. So basically, this PPT was kept in mind, and very for the first time, the whole Middle East Amex they wanted to move to Agile. So people were not used to Agile. So the examples and everything was kept in mind, so that it's from a layman perspective also they can understand. So it's not planned because I was not aware that the need was more from a certification perspective or the various dashboards and workflow creation in Jira.
Okay. All right. But do you have material for that? Is that something that you can coach me on?
Definitely, but as far as the Jira is concerned, I have to have a glance at it because I have not personally logged in and created workflows or something. So same thing before sharing this PPT, I removed the uh, things we had for MX, which was specific for them that I removed, and also let me see if in my current organization's login I can make a different login into the Jira for practice session or something like I can show you. Otherwise, I can download few of the videos and share with you and walk you through those.
Okay.
Okay, so basically we'll talk on what is agile, how what is it different from the traditional waterfall model, what are the artifacts and the ceremonies.
Okay.
So talking about agile, so I'll not say agile came exactly in 2001, but as the PPT says, the agile manifesto was brought about by a group of 17 like-minded individuals, like they were also software developers, and they went for a skiing in Utah, in a snowboard resort they managed. So while also they were enjoying with their friends, but while discussing, they came to know that all of them are facing a typical challenge, what was predominantly happening in the software industry. So that was the discussion prompted off, and they jotted down these four, which is called the Manifesto of Agile. So we'll talk about each of them. So if we talk about first one, individuals and interactions over process and tools. So it's not that in waterfall they were not being following those things, but in case of agile they felt like, so individuals and interaction. So these are basically two different words. So if we talk about the very first one, individuals. So in case of a typical waterfall for you'll find that people are given tasks and they are given a timeline. So typically a waterfall project in the workshops, the very junior most people are not involved. Their voices are not heard, but they are the developers. They are actually working on that. So they don't have any clue, right? So what the estimation was there, whether it's valid or not. So that interaction was missing in case of a typical waterfall. So here, that's the reason you will find individuals and interactions are given more importance over process and tools. Why process and tools will come across in the subsequent slides. The second thing it is emphasizing on working software rather than compressive documents. Even I, in my initial days when I have worked on waterfall projects, we have seen that almost the last 1 week it was kept only for documenting whether the client needs or not. It was simply dumped to them rather than focusing what the software we have developed, whether it is really what the client was expecting, whether it's going to meet the expectation of the client or not. So the documentation, it's not that again in agile we are not emphasizing anything on the documentation part. No documentation, it is there, but limited what is required for the minimum system. The third point, it talks about the customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So we involve the client in every stage. So if we talk about, if you are familiar with the Scrum ceremonies, so if we talk about the demo part, sprint planning, so everywhere client is involved. In case of a typical waterfall, what was happening after the initial the workshop was happening, and when the development was happening, there was no communication happening between the team and the customer. That is to lead to the scope creep, as a result of which we have a definite picture. I'll just go over. This was happening, so the requirement was something else and the delivery else was happening something else.
Okay.
And the last thing what I'll say the most about agile is, in case of a typical waterfall, so whatever was part of the SOW, the scope of work, anything which was not there in the SOW is to come as a change request. So if I talk about one of the search functionalities, any of the things that client have not thought about that my competitor has, and I have overlooked it completely, and the project is already in progress. And tomorrow, if I don't include this, and by the time it is going to, I'm going to complete my current project, it is going to come as a change request. It is not going to deliver any value to me. So as a result of which, the business value was lost. The customers used to face a lot of financial issues. So these are the things which prompted and Agile is addressing, which Waterfall had a drawback. Any question on this, Farah?
No, no questions.
You will have a few questions in the exams related to that. Basically, Agile has these four manifestos and 12 principles.
Okay, for manifesto. Okay,
The second thing is what is about. Agile is nothing, what I was just talking in the previous slide. So what my initial the project I started off. So that scope has changed, or any of the things unknowns that we have discovered. Okay. So that is what Agile is saying about is hitting a moving target. In case of a typical waterfall, what was happening? The target was fixed, and anything which was not there, any scope change, that was coming as a change request, and as a result of which it was not adding any value to the client.
hmm, okay,
So this is what Agile is. There are some miscommunication. That's the reason I have deliberately put this slide. So people
okay.
think like in case it's not organized. So since it is welcoming change, so it is not organized. Anything, no, it's not like that. So in the subsequent slides, we'll have like we have the product backlog, which keeps on refining. So why it is again, I will not say structured because we have certain rules, we have few ceremonies, and it goes by that. And why it is not unplanned, because I'll say that the scope I can accommodate a change, but the sprint timelines, the deadlines, the release, everything is planned. The next two points which I was already highlighting, people say that there's no documentation. That is a very, very wrong misconception. Okay. So there is a documentation deliberately required in Agile, but that is a minimum. It's not that I am going to dedicate it entire a month or a week only to do the documentation. So this takes in parallel when the work is getting in progress. So definitely we have not kept aside any week or a day to just to work on documentation. The last is not discipline part. Rather, it is very disciplined because that's the reason it is getting so much popular these days. And not only the software industry will find Agile being followed everywhere. Rather, I'll say software industry has borrowed this. If we talk about Scrum, it has come from rugby. If we talk about Lean, and if we talk about Kanban, so it goes back to Toyota, and it came from car manufacturing industry. So
Okay.
this was what I was just talking about. So in a lot of projects, I'll say, uh, starting from if I talk about my days of Shell, oil major, if I talk about banks, I have worked for Lloyd Banks, ANZ Bank, and Kuwait Finance House in the Middle East. Also, I have done this work for MX. For them also, I've seen a lot of requirement. So so there was a gap between the requirement and the delivery. So if you see this figure, they have two wheels in the bicycle also, but we also have two wheels in the bike. But how the requirement was explained and how this was interpreted, it was different. As a result of which the delivery has faltered. Now, instead of the bicycle, the delivery team is offering a motorbike. Definitely, it's a good looking, but it doesn't add any value to the client. And moreover, the cost has gone up. And this used to lead to the frequent fight between the development or the project team as well as the customer. And that brought about Agile. So this is the comparison you'll find in case of a typical waterfall and Agile. How is it? I'll quickly run through it. So initially there used to be the requirement gathering session. Once the requirement gathering session was done, they used to start with the design phase. So once the design was over, so we used to go to the development. And once the development was happening, so far I will, since you are from the QA background, you'll be able to understand. So they used to do the various kind of testing over here. So
Yeah.
until unless they're reaching this last stage, they were not involved in the various stages. And you'll find that as the arrow goes, anything which needs a back, so it has to again start from the requirement. They'll validate the requirement. Again, the design is going to happen. The development is going to happen. And finally, they are going to come to the QA. Until this phase, customers were never involved. So how is it different in case of Agile? You'll find, see, all the four stages are there. So if I talk about the whole project, so in this particular figure, one, two, three, four, five, six, they've split it into six sprints, or you can say six releases in which they are going to deliver the project. So if I take the worst case, the very first sprint went for a toss. Okay. So what was the requirement and what the delivery has happened? So in this case, in case of a typical agile, the most complex thing is taken at first, not the at the last. So in this case, it will be the wheels. So if that has gone wrong in the very first sprint, so we have enough five to take care of. And definitely when you are developing it at the end of every day and hour, so you are not waiting for the last day of the demo. So we are involving the customer in that, so they can give a live feel and say, no, this was not my expectation. You know what I was looking like. So you incorporate those feedbacks, and definitely you have a scope to improve, and the whole project doesn't go for a toss. Any questions on this?
No, no.
So the next is the whole, in case of a Scrum project, this is the entire life cycle, how it happens. So initially, if we talk about the required gathering, so it's an ongoing process. If you'll see, like it is coming and getting dropped. So in case of a typical, if we talk waterfall, we used to have the Microsoft project plan, right? So once the project has started, we used to break down into work breakdown structure, and the work is to happen. But in case of agile, so this requirement gathering is not a one-time process. So definitely those requirements are coming, and we are maintaining them in a place called, which is known as product backlog. And this product backlog refinement happens throughout the project life cycle. Anything like if we talk about that doesn't have any value, that will go out. Anything new which is they have identified, they can add it. Suppose from this, initially I have taken, I made a ranking. So there are 100 requirements, and the very first 10 I'm working on, that we have decided is the most important. We have started off. Then we realize that 30 to 40, those requirement doesn't hold good. It is going out. Rather 20 more requirement has come in, and we again do the ranking. And from the product backlog, so basically we take out a few items basis of the ranking, and we have a pre-sprint story review. So when you say about like refinement of those things, if any information is missing, and since we are talking about Jira Fara, so those will be in the backlog. And there is a concept in Jira, so whether those user stories are in a defined stage, whether the definition of ready, the definition of done, those conditions has been reached out not. Whether team has any open has questions, those has been addressed or not. Until and unless those stage has reached, so those stories will not be pulled into the sprint backlog. That means still those are not refined. And in the sprint planning session, definitely each and every user stories. I hope you're familiar with an user stories and everything, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So so basically in the sprint planning, so they ensure those are not at an epic level. Okay. So even if it is at an epic level, so in the pre-sprint review, they split it into user stories and they work on the sprint backlog. And in the sprint planning meeting for the upcoming sprint, they know what is the team's capacity, how much story points to be loaded, and it depends on clients to client whether they are going to use t-shirt sizing, Fibonacci series, flying poker, how they are going to do it. And once the sprint backlog is committed, so team was started going to work on the sprint. So Agile says a sprint duration can be 1 to 4 weeks, but my see as of now I have not seen any team working on 1 week sprint. The reason is 1 week is too long. In that also you have to do the planning, you have to do the retro and the testing. At the same time, 4 weeks is too long because again in current CGI we have few teams who are having a sprint duration of 4 weeks, which is almost a month. But because those user stories are interdependent on various other line of business, and we cannot split them into smaller user stories. That's the reason. But typically, if we talk about maximum projects, they run on a sprint duration of 2 to 3 weeks. And once every day, actually, there's going to be a daily stand-up meeting. Team is going to come and say what they are working on, if there is any roadblocks, what they have achieved from yesterday, and what is the plan from today. And if there is any roadblock, they highlight it to the Scrum Master to get help in that. So like this, typically for a 10 days, on the 10th day, we are going to have a demo and retro. Subsequently, after a few sprints, it's the management decides when they are going to go for a release. And it is a MVP when it is reached, that is the potential shippable increment, they go for a release. So coming to roles, you will find this blue circle. In that, you will find product owner, scrum master, and the scrum team. And outside the circle, we have the stakeholder and the business owners. Definitely, who was giving us the business and the vision and everything. And a typically a scrum team doesn't have like a typical waterfall. We have this BA, technical lead. So those kind of fancy designations are not present. So we say a scrum team. So which also have a business analyst, developers, testers, everyone. If you have DevOps also, so DevOps guy will also be part of this. Test automation, everything, if it is in scope. The very first role, so it's of the product owner. So this typical person, he or she has the vision of the project. So he is working as a liaison between the team and the stakeholder. Rather, we should say him a person who is representing the stakeholder, who knows the line of business very well. So he or she is going to define the features of the product, because the team might not be knowing what is the expectation of the management, why those features are part of the product backlog. So he or she represents the business. So if there is any questions that arises and he is also or she is not aware, they get back to the stakeholders and come back and inform the team. This person is also responsible for achieving maximum business value from the product, because I was giving in the previous example, any of the business scenario has got changed, and until and unless we incorporate that in the current product backlog, so that those value is going to get missed. Then what was happening in case of a typical waterfall? So that was a difference, and as a result of which, if he or she feels anything which has brought in a scope change, and we need to address that scope, and which has a very high business value. So if I go back to my old diagram here, so those things will be added and will come up the hierarchy, and the ranking will be done accordingly. So next point exactly is talking about that. Prioritize features according to business value. So this business value can change from time to time, but as a product owner, it should not change in between a sprint. That is the worst case it can happen. Next, responding to change and reprioritize. This only can arise. There is a need from the stakeholder in the business, and to address the business need, he or she should have the business justification, and should also, it's not that thrust on the team, make the team understand what prompted this requirement. And this product owner is the final person who is going to accept or reject. When I talk about work results, there's nothing but the user stories. In case of a typical safe, it is the product owner, but a different roles. So this particular session that today I'm talking is basically at a Scrum level, not at a safe level.
Okay.
Any questions on this?
No, no questions.
Okay. So next slide, I'll definitely give a lot of emphasis, because you are preparing for the Scrum Master. So each and every point I'm going to talk and give a lot of examples. Stop me for anywhere you need more explanation or things are not clear to you. Okay.
Okay.
The very first point, it talks about Scrum Master is a servant leader. So many of the Scrum Masters, even when I was a Scrum Master, didn't used to like this particular word. So if we talk about, there are two words on that, servant and a leader. So this gives a lot of people says, how come I become a servant as well as a leader? So it has two aspects of looking this into this word. In case of a typical waterfall project, how the project manager is to dictate, that doesn't happen in case of agile. So basically he works as a servant for the team. So he doesn't incorporate or trust his voice on the team. He makes sure he he or she that who is playing that role ensures that all the team's voice is being heard. It may be the most junior most member, it may be the most senior most member, everyone has a say, and he is going to be a servant to the team and lead by capturing their what the thoughts are, what the blockages are, and help them arrange that. In case of there is any blockage, in case of any requirement, any technical sessions, that's when he represents and lead the team. That's why it's as a leader, but he never thrust his views and his ideas on the team. Next is conflict resolution. Definitely, we have also seen. So when there will be individuals, there will be conflicts. But we need to take care of those. There will be something, any way out to resolve in. Two developers might not agree on a certain issue or a way of development on a code. And this will be the most common example you'll find for the developer and the tester not agreeing on a certain point. Then how to go and mitigate that? So he is going to a person who is going to resolve those conflicts are always welcome in agile, but those should be a healthy conflicts, not like cold war, people not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
He is going to provide guidance to the teams. Definitely, when I say a guidance from agile or a scrum's perspective. He or she may be a technical person, but he or she not going to sit and code. He can encourage team to use the best practices, and there'll be some challenge and obstacles to the program. Might be also a person is being pulled into some other engagement working at the same time. So Scrum Master is a person who is going to raise his voice on that. In this occasion, he's not a servant, he's a leader. He highlights to the management that no, his prime focus is in my team. He's not going to get engaged in some other deliveries, and my current engagement is going to get affected. Ensure that the team is fully functional and productive is very, very important. In case I have also worked for my organizations, I have also found this gap is happening. There are people who are very, very good technically, but they don't have functional knowledge. On the other hand, you will see there are people who are have functional knowledge, they have domain knowledge 10 plus years, but they don't have enough technical expertise to explain to the team. And as a result of which the team used to falter, as a result of which the requirement and the delivery is to be a huge gap. So he or she understands this needs, talk to the team, and get to know whether they need what time of help, whether it is a functional or technical, and he highlights to the management and gets those things done for the team. Enable close cooperation across all roles and functions. This is very, very important in Agile and Scrum because we don't have a typical technical lead, QA lead, BA lead, those kinds of fancy designations are not there. So whatever roles are there as a developer, as a tester, so until and unless there is close cooperation, the Scrum benefits are not going to help out and it's going to falter. Any questions, Farah?
No, no questions,
Okay.
Kaushik.
And the last is the Scrum team. So again, I'm giving an example only from a Scrum perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that exactly it has to be five and within 5 and 10. There are also like in my current organization, I'm seeing there are member over 13. But again, it should not cross 20 because if we talk about the daily stand up, it is a time boxed event of 15 minutes. If you have 20 members in your team, if you dedicate 1 minute also for the update, it is going to take 20 minutes. That's the result. Reason I'll say it is good to have a small team of in the range of 5 to 10 people. And in that 5 to 10, we should have a healthy balance of VA developers and testers. And the next point, it talks about cross functional. The reason I'll give a live example. So all three testers in my previous organization took leave on a same day. One was on a planned leave, other person fell sick, and the other had to leave office early. She had come in office, but she had to leave early. So that's the reason. Suppose we have some testing activity which is going on. Until and unless there is cross-functional, so we cannot reach out to client and say we don't have any testers and today there is no activity. Again, I'm not saying that the tester is going to sit and do the coding, but they should have a small understanding the what is the expectation, how they do the work, so that next time also they can think about. That's the reason when the estimation happens in case of agile, we also say you as a tester just tell us in case you are the developers how much effort is required in that. Same thing goes for the developer. The developer also says for the testing, I feel like this much of hours is going to be required. And that's the reason we talk about we need cross-functional people so that they can understand what is the scope, what is the vision. And the Scrum team definitely it contains of business analysts, developer, testers. In case again, I was giving examples. So nowadays we have a lot of automation happening. So we have definitely those people who are working. So manual testers and automation testers, also the DevOps if that is also in scope. Yeah, I'll make a pause and ask you, Farah. So if you talk about the QA perspective,
Mm-hmm.
so how is it happening in your projects? In the live sprints, they are working on test automation, or it's just n minus one?
It's a lot of manual, but I also do automation. So I
Hmm.
use Selenium for that.
Okay.
So
So
yeah.
I'm saying when the test automation is happening at the same time when the development is happening, or once they have completed the sprint, you are working on the test automation of those things.
Only after completion of sprint we work
Yeah,
on test
okay, yeah.
automation.
That's how means it was happening in PwC, my previous organization,
Mm-hmm.
and same thing is happening in CGI. N minus one.
Okay.
Okay. So going back to the next point, core members should be full time, whether it's a product owner, scrum master, and the team members, because until and unless this is happening, we have shared resources, and they will not be able to understand the grim of the situation. And if they are not full-time members, they'll not give their best. And since the deadlines are quite fixed here, 2 weeks, so you cannot borrow those resources and all of a sudden understand, because here we are working on sprint. So few of the if they have already worked on previous sprint, they'll know the flow. So if they are part-time members and we include new member, they'll not will be understand the flow. And here again, I am emphasizing on this word, teams are self-organizing, because they themselves will say, Kaushik, this last time we worked on that, the requirements uh, was not clear. So this time we have already gone through the user stories of the upcoming sprint, and these are my questions. As a Scrum Master, you should ensure those things they are doing it. And the Scrum Master, the product owner should always work on the current sprint plus two, so that you are refining the backlog in the long term also. If there is any scope change, you can address that. And very important thing, individuals take ownership. In case of a typical waterfall, work was assigned to them. In case of agile, it's not a push, it's a pull. So we have completed the role, Farah. Any questions on any of the roles?
No, Kaushik, no questions.
Okay. So now we're almost covered that. So let's see what. So basically, the requirement phase and the product backlog phase, we're going to emphasize this. So
Okay.
when a project is starting without a vision, a project never actually occurs. It addresses a business need. So a product planning starts with the business vision. So in case any of you have been in the PI planning meetings, so the very first meeting will get kicked open with the stakeholders' vision, what they're trying to address, why they're funding that particular project, what prompted that project to arise. So the vision also guides the MVP. So are you familiar with this word MVP?
No. What is MVP?
Okay. So it is called minimum viable product. That is the full form of MVP. So we're talking about the sprints, right? So
Yes.
how often after 2 or 3 sprints, when you club those deliveries, you can go
Mm-hmm.
for a release. Suppose if I give you an example of airline major or a
Mm-hmm.
e-commerce website, maybe in the very first month, I'll not be able to give you all the functionalities, okay?
Mm.
So in case of a typical airline, so what their aim will be to build the
So
search
this is
functionality.
talking about a completely new project, like from scratch when you're starting, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you're telling it'll take at least 2 to 3 sprints to deliver this project.
Not only it can be a huge, it can be a year, okay?
Okay.
So basically in the very first 2 or 3 sprint, what at least I can present to my management, okay? So that they understand whatever money I have invested is going in the right direction. So if I talk about the flight booking, so at least they can build the search functionality, okay, and show that I have made the front end ready. The from to those criteria is working fine. The, from the business perspective, what should come next?
Okay.
No, I'm asking you a question.
Oh, um, I'm not sure, Kaushik.
The billing part, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You're going to book the ticket. Once you book the ticket, the money should come to the company. So
Yes.
here, I was giving example for so might be it's a 1 year project, okay? But
Mm-hmm.
if I am able to build that functionality in credit card rather than giving them an option of 4 or 5 of Visa, Master, and I am not sure what other you have used. Amex they has their own payment domain. So similarly, there are Mastercard and other things. Okay. So rather than making 10 options, at least if I can start working from one that I'm only giving Visa payment. Okay. Again from net banking and rather than giving 20 banks, at least few well-known banks. So this is going to help me at least the project run and gets some amount of money coming back to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, I can add on few more banks and take those things as an user story. But since I have built my search functionality and my billing functionality is also ready, at least this part I can make it live. Does it make sense?
It does make sense. Yes,
Yeah.
Kaushik.
So this is nothing what I was giving an example of a minimal viable product. So this business says until unless you build this product, don't go for a release. It doesn't make any sense for me. And that's how they arrange the requirement and they can go for small releases.
Okay. Hey, Kaushik, I have a question that is not really
Sure,
linked
sure.
to this. Can you tell me if the Scrum Master conducts meetings with the stakeholders?
He is a facilitator, but I'll not say he'll conducts that. Basically, it is the product owner who
Okay, so the
interacts
product.
with the stakeholder in the business. But
Okay.
sometimes the owner and the scrum masters also. jointly attend those meetings. But sometimes there is some business value which the team
Okay.
is also supposed to know.
Okay.
So in those sessions, if we talk about arranging those, so those responsibilities Scrum Masters are going to take ownership. So basically, he arranges for those date, he blocks the calendar, he invites those people, s- but he is a facilitator.
Okay. All right.
So next is the very most important thing is about the product backlog. So in case of a product backlog is fine, it is which comprises of four steps. We initiate it, it keeps on refine it, we need to estimate, and we need to plan accordingly. The very first step is the initiation sense. But if you see in the right side, Farah, there is a pick. It starts from the project. From the project, various features are identified. I was giving example of this airline booking system, right? They
Mm-hmm.
identify the various features which is going to be part of that project. Those features will be at a very high level. So if I talk about billing functionality, that is an epic. We cannot directly build that. In that billing, we'll have credit card, we'll have net banking, and various other ways to pay that. So
Hmm.
those will be at an epic level. Again, in net banking, which are the banks you are going to have? So that will come as a user story. In that, what are the various tasks you will write so that your search functionality or there's going to be a radio button or a checkbox. Those will be at a task level. And since you mentioned that you're working, you want those workflow. So I'm also working on a similar thing like the dashboard is not reflecting the right data. The reason is because the one user story is related to multiple epics. So that is a wrong thing. So those data cleanup activities I'm doing so that the CFL level people they need to understand what is the progress of the project, how far is still in development, how far is still in backlog, and how far they have achieved it. The next is the refinement one. See again here it's the product owner and the team works through the product backlog to clarify the requirements and they make it simplify wherever it's necessary. They feel like anything which in the user story needs more information, they get those requirements clarified with the product owner. And in case simplifying, they have any questions, they feel like that is at a epic level, they bring it down at a user story level. The objective is to cover 60% of the product backlog where each item is dealt within a sprint. Because when we are starting the project, till the last, whatever the requirement, we cannot actually clarify everything. As you move down the project, there will be something which will go out of the scope and something which will get more clarified. That's the reason we're saying 60%. But this 60% doesn't apply in an active sprint. I'm saying I was just giving those example, right? Farah, when you work as a scrum master along with the product owner, when the team is working on the 10th sprint, basically both of you will be working on the 12th sprint. So
Okay.
that this
Okay, Kaushik, I'm
60%,
sorry. I'll
yeah,
have
tell me.
have to do a hard stop here.